What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, this is one of my favorite videos that I do every single year, is where we're going to dive into three concerns that I have about the upcoming 2025 season for the New York Giants. So let's dive into it, with the first one being injuries. And this one is kind of like a 1-2 combination, especially for a guy like Malik Neighbors. In terms of, he has had a number of nagging preseason injuries. He had the shoulder, he had a little neck, he had a little foot. And the foot was kind of where it was just a combination of things that really, impacted him last year, specifically the concussion. Where during last season, you saw Daniel Jones just feeding him hospital balls. He's getting crushed over the middle. And even that one final one against the Cowboys where he just landed on his head out of bounds and knocked himself out of the game, essentially. So Malik Neighbors had a really tough go at it his rookie season, even though he did have a breakout season to that as well, in terms of setting franchise records with 109 receptions, over 1,200 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns while getting to a Pro Bowl. So for the Giants to have success this year, they're going to need him to be as healthy as possible. And unfortunately, I don't think that was the case this preseason. I know that every single time Brian Dable's at the podium and the beats are asking him about how's Neighbors looking, how's his injury, he's getting like rest days and stuff. So to that extent, right, the offense will be going through him essentially. And where I'm going to add, we're going to talk a lot about more injuries in this first category, but one other major concern that I won't get into, I guess, maybe in too much detail here, but is if Malik Neighbors does go down, how cooked are the Giants? And is there anyone else in this offense that could step up? I don't see it at the wide receiver position. And then hopefully, to be seen so far about Tracy and Scatabo, what they have to offer. So we'll see, and we'll revisit this conversation in a couple weeks to see who else does step up. But right now, we'll just keep it to our first concern, which is injuries. So I really hope Neighbors could be as healthy as possible. And guys, I totally get it. Injuries do happen as the season progresses. Just look around the league. Within the first couple weeks, there will be major players going down from season-ending injuries. It's just the nature of the game. What I wanted to just cover off here is that I am concerned because there were injuries last season, and it doesn't seem like they were necessarily improved upon or totally fixed to be as healthy as possible coming into this season. So I'm concerned about Neighbors. Next up on this list is someone who's been injured really for the last 2 full seasons after having a great season, which would be Andrew Thomas. And then more recently with him, the beats were at his locker asking him questions, being like, how do you feel? And he looked so dejected during this interview of being like, I'm not going to play until I'm healthy enough. And it doesn't seem like he's healthy enough. I did do videos about this previously about Andrew Thomas when he did have the Liz Frank surgery. And this offseason, too, he also had his ankle scoped, which would have been bothering him and it was hurt. And then the Liz Frank surgery a couple of years ago, and this might be a little bit of too much of an aside, but when bantamweight Sugar Sean O'Malley in the UFC, he's about 135 pounds in that division, right? And he's a very nimble guy, quick on his feet, but he had to get the Liz Frank surgery on his foot. And he said that was the hardest rehab process he's ever gone through. And honestly, he's had a lot of L's since. So he never really got back to that full form that he had at one point. Now, think about that as a 135 pounder having those issues just from, different sports, right? But just hear me out on it. Now you're a guy who's 6'3", 315 pounds. That's a lot of weight on a injury related to your foot, right? So, and it's just one of those things where if you start reading more into this injury, it's very hard to rehab too. It's because you essentially just have to wait and see how it heals. But when you're doing that, you're not getting reps in. And I think, I am a little disappointed in Joe Shane. They did bring in Hudson, who will probably be tackle this weekend. And Embo, they drafted him as well. But I don't know if he's exactly NFL ready after just, looking like he did beat up on guys in the preseason. I do wish, and it was hard to do, to bring in someone else to be like, hey, we're banking on this guy we gave a large contract to, an Andrew Thomas, being hurt. So we have to have someone else ready to go week 1. I think they tried to do that, but it is a little bit underwhelming and it is a major concern because I don't want this excuse to be, again, well, Andrew Thomas was hurt, so the whole season got thrown away. That cannot be an excuse. And I'm extremely concerned about it because it doesn't necessarily seem like this situation was properly addressed as strong as it should have been. And I'm very concerned about it. And I'm also concerned about his health and if he could ever get back to the form that he did have that one season where I think he was unquestionable and all pro, even though he didn't get that or whatever. But I'm nervous for him. I'm nervous for how this impacts the season because the Giants, we'll talk about offensive line in a little bit, but I'm just nervous about how that impacts things overall and sticking to the game plan. Next up, this is someone going into their sophomore season that the Giants have had a lot of. They just love this guy, and for whatever reason, maybe because they drafted him, Theo Johnson skyrocketed up the depth chart last year, took over for Bellinger, really kind of supplanted Bellinger in that lineup. And then there was a lot of other names and guys in this preseason with Dulcich, who got acquired once they put him in waivers. He went to the Dolphins, signed off that practice squad there, who he had a pretty good preseason. Then Thomas Fedone, who they drafted in the 7th round, also had a good preseason. So there are a lot of names and Chris Manhertz too, in that tight end room. But the reason that gets me concerned about Theo Johnson was, he got hurt, missed a lot of time last year. This year, already in the lead up, hasn't even been practicing some days, and then they say he's fine. So just something to keep an eye out that, if we're losing our starting tight end or he's not 100% healthy enough to go this season, how that's going to impact things. And it does concern me, but I do maybe this is an opportunity for other guys to step up, like Bellinger. Manhertz, they seem to see like he's a blocker, the best blocker, a well-rounded blocker compared to everyone else. And then hope that opens the door for Bellinger, maybe even Fedone for looks there. Next up is a new face in the locker room that I am concerned about. He was electric to start the preseason. Everyone was hyped to see the clips from practice of him catching. We all remember the game that Scatabo had it against the Texans in the college football playoffs, or Texas in the college football playoffs. And one nagging injury that he's had so far this preseason was a hamstring. Not something you want to see from a rookie running back. Hamstrings can linger. It's just the nature of the business. Eventually, hopefully it heals as quickly as possible, and he's doing all the things in rehab. But I hate when one of my running backs that is explosive and needs to be fast is dealing with a hamstring injury before the real season starts. And then next up, also concerned from an injury perspective, my two boys at linebacker, Micah and Bobby, both had injuries last season, got shut down. After Okereke had a great season 2 years ago, McFadden also, I think, could have a very strong year. I really like both of these guys a lot. I'm very optimistic for them coming back. I think it was just once the season was out of grasp, let's just shut it down and be as healthy as possible going into next year. Dexter also hurt after playing 12 games. Probably had one of his best seasons I've seen him have. And I mean, again, I think this was also hey, season's over. You have a nagging injury, let's shut it down. Let's get surgery. Let's do whatever you have to do to be 100% for the next one because the season's already over. So that sums up my concerns about injuries, guys. I know injuries do happen. It's part of life. It's part of the NFL. But these are some key ones that I'm very concerned about as we approach the start of the NFL season. Next up is concern number 2, which will be the offensive line, because the offensive line has been so piss poor for such a long amount of time that it feels like, where seasons have gone off the rails. The other season, they gave up 84 sacks. No one had time. We've seen 4 quarterbacks play in back-to-back seasons because of the ass kickings that they've taken without coaching adjustments, without stuff along those lines. So I want to be optimistic about the future of this offensive line. But speaking with people, they're like, why do you think the offensive line will be better? And I'm like, outside of, Andrew Thomas being not healthy, they should be better just based on bringing in some other guys and guys getting healthy, right? Runyon missed a lot of time last year too. But again, going back to the injury, Andrew Thomas, is there someone that could step in, the guy Hudson, to fulfill that role? Or do they take a flyer on Embo to start? I mean, Embo was playing against backups in the preseason, looked good. How is he going to look against, really good defensive players, especially in the division? against like the Eagles and stuff along those lines. Let's say Greg Van Roten was the only guy on offense, I believe, to start play in every single game last year. That is something that, he could hang his hat on, and then we could also build off that because that's a little bit of consistency. And then you also had Evan Neal make the transition from tackle to guard, but he still looks like shit. So you tanked kind of like any trade value you might have had with him by making him do that transition where he clearly wasn't a good enough athlete at tackle, which I think you have to be a good athlete to play. But guard too, when you really have shitty footwork and you have poor balance, he is a freak big body guy, but it just doesn't seem like he has the um, athleticism to really play in the NFL. Obviously, at Alabama, he was able to get by titty bumping and Lane putting his big body on people. But as you could see, he's had a very tough time acclimating to the NFL level. Maybe he's been hurt. Maybe it'll just take him even longer. But I don't know if he'll get that chance with us, as I don't think he's good enough to play at this point. Which brings me up to the next person I'm concerned about at center, John Michael Schmitz. He had some shitty snaps in the preseason. He just gets thrown around. You would think, too, I always talked about this, like how if he's going against Dexter Lawrence in practice every day, he would have to be better, but that's not always the case, right? Even if we look at it an example sake of Eric Flowers versus, JPP and Vernon and guys like that, they never really got him better, right? And maybe the same thing will hold true for John Michael, big body kid. They invested in him, taking him in the second round pick, and they're kind of like tied to him to see if they don't want to abandon him, right? But it seems like there's something not clicking or he's just not getting to that point yet. So I'm honestly concerned about John Michael Schmitz as center. And if he's going to suck and get bowled over, then move Van Roten to guard or move Van Roten from guard to center, and see what happens. Maybe plug someone in a guard, but we can't just be solidified in, hey, we took this guy and invested a second round pick with him and have him tank a season. So they have to be flexible in that regard. And so to my point, and all these guys in the offensive line room, they say the right things. Luminor says the right things. Runyon says the right things. They want to be leaders on the team. They want to set the tone, but they haven't done it to this point over the last few seasons for a multitude of different reasons. Maybe even coaching was one of them, right? They got rid of, and they got a new coach, O-line coach, but that kind of dissipated, halfway through last season. So I am concerned about it, and I won't believe it until I see it, and I don't think you should either. Up next, my third cause of concern here is the secondary. They have made some adjustments to this in terms of bringing in guys and not putting as much pressure in Deonte Banks, who they're not naming who the second corner is to start between Banks and Cordell Flott, which is very concerning considering they, used a first-round pick on Banks just a few short seasons ago where I thought Banks was totally fine his rookie year with Wink Martindale. Then they get rid of McKinney. They get a new coordinator, and then he's kind of gone to shit. I did a more extensive video about Deonte Banks, so I'll link it up top if you want to go and watch that, why I said it's make or break. I talk season for him and talk about all of these things. So I won't spend too much time talking about Banks, but it is a cause for concern. Flott potentially being a starter is a cause for concern. Paulson Adebo, believe he was hurt last year, and we're slotting him in as CB1. Little bit concerning, but this is you can't be the most. I guess teams have holes, right? And I believe the secondary is a hole for the Giants currently as it stands. And when you look at it, here's the thing. The D-line is so good, and on paper, the linebackers are good, edge, everything looks good there. But when you get to the secondary, it's kind of like that's where the gap is for me. So can they get to the passer? Can they be creative and blitzing to make the secondary's life easier downfield on pass plays? We'll have to see. But let's just go through the list here. Tyler Newman, fairly successful rookie season. Let's see if he could build on that. And then Javion Holland was a free agent that they brought in from the Dolphins, where Dolphins fans weren't too hyped on him. I really haven't heard much buzz about him this preseason, so I believe, that could be a good thing. that he wasn't getting cooked too much, but we'll see how he looks. He's a guy, another, you could throw him into concern one. I feel like he's had nagging injuries over the years, so we'll see how he looks. And then we have nickel cornerback Drew Phillips, who let's see if he could build on some of his early start to his career as well. So I am concerned about the secondary as my third concern there. And it's kind of, again, similar to the second thing. It's a wait and see approach. Can guys step up, or is it going to be, how we think they are, which is okay and needs to get by having a creative defensive game plan from Shane Bowen. So this part is actually my bonus concerns will be coaching. I'll talk about Shane Bowen because I'm talking about him right now, but pretty terrible effort in his first season with the Giants last year after the transition from Wink Martindale to Bowen. Wasn't too sure what his game plans were, besides that they didn't look good. Teams had a lot of time to pass. They never figured out how to stop the run. The Giants actually really haven't stopped the run since Leonard Williams left. And if you want to call me out on that, feel free. But that's just my 2 cents there. They never filled that gap, and it does show even if you do have a top 3 defensive tackle in the league. I don't know what Bowen's gonna have to shake off a pretty shitty game plan that he had year one for a lot of games where just didn't work out, and he's really has to evolve. And I am concerned about him because if he can't, then he's got to be gone after this season because we can't. There's too much talent on the defensive front to not be as creative as possible to get them in one-on-one situations where they have to beat the guy in front of them. And then on the flip side of things, from an offensive coaching perspective, you have Mike Kafka calling the plays again after a year off. I am a little concerned to see how that will look. Probably more comfortable with Kafka calling the plays than Dable last year. I didn't really think Dable impressed me in any way, shape, or form for being an offensive guru who was calling the plays. And kudos to Mike Kafka, because personally, I probably would have been like, screw you guys, you're taking my play calling from me. Like, what is my role in this organization? But clearly, in the 2022 season, after that season, Kafka was getting calls for interviews for potential head coaching jobs. So a lot of people in the league do like Mike Kafka. He was also the coach of the Senior Bowl last year. So there is a lot there. Anyway, hope you guys are ready for, as much for the season as I am. Those were my concerns. I'm hoping that, I don't come back and say, wow, I wish, I had something else on this list. But let me know in the comments what you guys are concerned about and what you're most excited for this season. I'm going to be posting my prediction show either later today or tomorrow. But thank you guys for watching and have a great rest of NFL opening weekend. So enjoy.